Yeah, it did.
Good evening, everybody. To the early birds, we're a little bit early. Quite a number of people already here, which is great. As usual, we'll just run through a few pre-slides a couple of times, give everyone a chance to join. Those of you that were with us last month will know about the chat function, and the chat function is something we make use of for questions. So have a play around with your screen, find a chat function, let us know who you are. Loads of people doing it already, loads of familiar names on there. So find a chat function, say hello, and familiarize yourself with the screen. You should be able to hear me. So if you're reading that and you can't hear me, check your connection. Last time round seemed to be pretty good. There's only one or two people that struggle to kind of sustain a steady connection, but use the chat. So if you're struggling, we've got people in the chat that can help. If there's any issues with your connection, flag it up in the chat, and we will help. We'll go through these a couple of times as people arrive, but what we tend to find is that Chrome browser works best. Okay, any browser should work, but if you are having problems, if you've got different browsers, use Chrome, and that might resolve them. If not, it's worth logging out and logging back in again to see if that works. Just to stress, we can't see you and we can't hear you. You can see us and hopefully hear us. But we do recommend, minimize distractions, get ready, and you will get the most out of the evening. So a couple of minutes until we'll formally kick off. Loads of people joining, loads of people saying hello in the chat, which is brilliant. See that, loads of names, loads of clubs from all over the country, which is brilliant, which is exactly what we want. So for those people joining, you should be able to hear me. If you're reading that, you can't hear me, use the chat function. So the chat function is within the system. It might be on the left, typically on the left. Sometimes it can be moved, or you may have moved it. So it's not on the left, don't worry. It's there somewhere. So use that, say hello, and that is where we will be asking you to respond to questions and flag up any issues throughout the evening session. So find the chat, say hello, use the chat if you're having any kind of connection issues, and we've got some people in the chat that can help. And as I said, for those people just joining us, if you are experiencing any technical difficulties, log out, log back in again, try another browser, and particularly if you've got Chrome, we would recommend that you use that. So we're closing in now on start time. So just that final flag, just to make sure everyone's aware. Don't worry, we can't see you, we can't hear you, but we do recommend that you minimize distraction, get comfortable, and you'll get the most from the evening. Okay, so it's 7:00. We're going to kick off promptly. I'm sure some people will still join from here, but a real good number again of people involved, which we're delighted to see. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. As we said, technical problems we're obviously trying to keep to a minimum. We were learned from our last experience, and hopefully some of you that were involved, if you did have any technical problems, understand the system a little bit more, and that can help. But we've got people to help, so flag in the chat function if you are having any problems, and don't panic, and we'll be there to help. We will be asking you specific questions, which we'll ask you to answer in the chat. But obviously, the other thing is we've got some questions from you prior to the session, and obviously, you're more than welcome to answer ask any questions in the chat as we go through. We've got resources, and the resource libraries within the interface and the system that you can see in front of you. And really important, if the worst comes to the worst, if we have any technical problems our side, if you have any technical problems, or you need to leave the webinar for any particular reason, then we do record the webinar, and you can download that and watch that at your convenience. We are aiming to finish at 8:00 again. We didn't quite achieve that last time, but we like to think we've given ourselves a better chance. So hopefully we'll be done by 8. And apologies in advance if we run a couple of minutes over. And again, feel like I'm stressing this throughout everything I'm saying, but do use a chat function to talk to us, to let us know, and to ask us what's going on for our webinar this evening, which is Feeding Your Turf. Okay, so a couple of introductions. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ted Mitchell, and I'm the RFU National Facility Manager. And I'm obviously delighted to be here again tonight and effectively, I suppose, hosting the proceedings, but really my input will be relatively minimal. And we have one presenter tonight, and that is obviously Jim Buttar, head groundsman, Twickenham Stadium. And we're obviously absolutely delighted Jim is here. Jim, how are you?
Yes, very well, thank you, Ted. Yep,
busy. How are busy? Any insight at Twickenham at the minute? Anything you're particularly working on?
We're still working through a 4-month case study at the moment, so we're doing lots of cultural practices and trying to adapt and change what we would probably normally do. So, yeah, we're a little bit out of our comfort zone on the basis being of how much work needs to go into it, but we're hoping we're going to get some good results at the end of it, really. So, yeah, no, it's going well. Busy.
Excellent. Good stuff. Thanks for that. Also involved tonight, we have Alex Bowden, who is our producer for the evening. So you won't be seeing Alex, but you'll be hearing from him. He will be looking after the polls that we'll be doing throughout the evening. And again, those of you that were involved last time round will be familiar with those. There's Alex. And those of you that are joining for the first time, the polls are very straightforward, very intuitive to use. So Alex will be joining us on audio to run through those. We also have John Bendel, who's in the background in the chat function to help out from the RFU, as is Alex Thompson, who was producing last time, but he's more in the background this time. Again, he may appear in the chat if needed. Also, delighted that a number of our RFU volunteer pitch advisors are involved this evening. So we've got Andy Spetch, we have got Lawrence Gale, and we have got Colin Worcester. And those 3 people will be actively involved in the chat to help pick up any questions and anything where they can share their wisdom and advice. So look out for their names in the chat. If you ask a question, it may be that they are able to give an immediate response. So we're absolutely, obviously delighted that they're able to join us. A few quick updates in terms of the last webinar. We were pleased with it as our first effort. The feedback we got was excellent, which we were delighted about. And in the end, I think we had 158 people involved, which was great, which is a really good number for a specialist topic. It's fair to say we were somewhat overwhelmed with the number of questions we got prior to the session and during the session. And as such, it's taken us a little longer to reply to them all. We wanted to do them justice. So it's taken us a little longer to reply to them all as we would have liked. But if you did ask a question, you should now have received a response, personalised response from the relevant area facilities manager with a response to your question. If you haven't had that yet, it will be imminent. If it hasn't come out this week, I know Jason down in Area 2 in kind of Hampshire, Oxfordshire, Berkshire Books, I saw him firing out a few emails this afternoon. So if you haven't had a response, check out your emails. And if you haven't had one, when you have a look, keep looking at those, and that will be coming through imminently. So a slight apology, but hopefully you understand that the number of questions was brilliant and was far in excess of any of the other webinars that the RFUs run. So we're pleased about that in one respect. We obviously talked last time about a real range of subjects, and we really focused on a groundsman and a club having a plan. So again, we just want you to refer back to that. Tonight's a specialist area, but we think the club plan is something that you can have and you can refer to and you can use. And then finally, it's just to say that tonight's session, last session was general, dipping in and out of lots of subjects. This is very much focused on one particular subject, and it is quite technical. By its very nature, it's quite technical. So what I encourage you to do is stick with it. All of it might make perfect sense and be perfectly relevant. If we start to move into areas that you feel a little bit less comfortable with, please stick with us. We will move on. We will move into different areas, and we still convince you'll get a huge amount from the evening. And obviously, importantly, the resource library will support and back up all the information that Jim shares when I hand over to him in a moment. So, in terms of the agenda for the evening, it's all about feeding your turf, feeding your grass, and fertilizers. So again, quite scientific, but we really want to try and make it relevant, specific to you guys. So, for example, we're going to be talking about soil and fertilizing and feeding, but we want that to be relative to your pitches and to your soil. So the first part is going to be about understanding your own soil and your own pitches. The second part of the agenda is around the importance of nutrients. So why are they important? Why should we look to use them, and what they do? Again, so breaking it right down, some very straightforward info, and then we'll delve into little bits a bit more scientific, and then relating back to that planning the application and timing of fertilizer inputs. Okay, so hopefully that's going to be really useful and relevant for everyone that's tuned in. So the objectives obviously relate back to the agenda. So what we're hoping by the end of the session, end of the webinar, is that you guys have got a bit of knowledge about how you can understand your own soil, help you to grow your turf in an optimum way using feed and nutrients, and if, how, and when you need to replenish nutrients on your pitch. Okay, so yes, scientific, and yes, detail, but we're trying to keep it as relevant to you guys as we can. So I'm going to hand over to Jim shortly to talk to us about understanding your own soil capabilities. But before we get going, Alex Bowden is just going to run our first poll.
Thanks, Ted, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to kick off with a bit of a poll around the soil types, just to see if we can get a bit of a feel for everybody out there and what soil you have. So in a second, you'll see the poll come up on your screen. If you are viewing this on full screen, the presentation, you'll need to just click back into the small screen so that you can see the poll come up. And I'll be launching the poll now. So the poll that should appear on your screen now is, do you know what soil type you have? A nice simple yes, no poll to kick us off. So it should be appearing on your screen, and I'll give you a few more seconds to make a decision on that. And this first one will hopefully allow us to sort of feed into the first bit with Jim nicely. So another couple of seconds, and we're going to finish up the poll. And that's now coming to an end. So brilliant. So sort of across that, we've got 70% of people know what soil they've got, which will feed in really nicely to what Jim's doing, and really important as well, the 30% that don't. Hopefully we can cover where you can then get support to do that and understand a bit more about why that's important. So we'll publish those polls, and I will hand back over to Jim. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Ted. If I just move ourselves across. Right. So for you people out there, again, this is more really to understand really what your soil is capable of. So I know obviously there's going to be a lot of issues with regards to drainage and a lot of things like that, which again, we can kind of divulge slightly in this one. This whole webinar is purely going to be more about the nutrients and what you can do and get most out of your soil. So it's very typical really to try and get a bit of a gauge of the characteristics of your soil. So again, it's just going to give you a bit of an idea of what your pitch is capable of from a nutrient point of view. So we need to be very sure of the soil type that you've got. We'll just move on to the next slide. So I think I put this up on the resource bank last time, which was a website, Soilscapes website. Essentially, you can put the town you're in, postcode into the search bank, and literally it will identify your area and what the indigenous soil is in and around essentially where your pitch is laid onto. So it's going to give you a bit of an indicator of what your indigenous soil is capable of, whether it's fertile, how it drains, in terms of its pH, whether it's more inclined to be acidic or alkaline. And all these things will have an impact on how nutrients will work in the soil. So again, the best way really to get an idea of what your pitch makeup is, it's essentially just to do, and my predecessor was very good at this, get the spade out, dig an inspection hole, and essentially take some of that soil out. And the best way to do it is actually feel it in your hands. So you get a bit of an idea of whether it's sandy soil, clay, or if it's a silt soil. And there's normally quite obvious characteristics with this one. So you tend to find obviously sandy soils will feel a bit gritty. Clay will obviously, when you squeeze it together, it will form a bit of a sausage, and you can actually just polish the sides once you've done that. Silt tends to be, again, it does pack together quite nicely, but it does after a while. If you squeeze it really hard, it will go a little bit like clay, but it has similar properties to sand in that respect, that you can break it back up again quite easily. In terms of the soils and their kind of characteristics, again, so sandy soils, again, it tends to be quite light. It's generally dry. It will warm up a lot quicker in spring. It will probably cool down quite quickly towards the back end, so it doesn't really retain that heat, but it does warm up quickly. It will be naturally low in nutrients, so it hasn't got the capacity to hold on to nutrients on its own. Again, quick draining, which is what you'd expect. And then often they tend to be acidic, sandy soils. Clay soils, this almost the opposite end of the spectrum. They tend to be quite heavy. They're naturally high in nutrients. It tends to be wet, cold in winter, tend to bake dry in summer, prone to waterlogging. So I think a lot of you guys will probably be able to relate to this. And then the clay normally tends to be alkaline. The graphic there on the right-hand side, that's typically what they use as an illustration to gauge on what percentage your makeup of your pitches and your soils are. So you'll see a bit later on when I move through, I've essentially put on there what Twickenham is. So I'm sure a lot of you can probably have a good guess of where that sits in terms of this triangle. And obviously what you've got here at the moment is what you'd class as the extremes, really. So the 3 points of the triangles are essentially the three extremes, as it were, with regards to this. Again, silt soils, they tend to be quite fertile. That again, light, so it has the texture in terms of the sand. It's quite a light in terms of volume. When you feel it, hasn't got any weight to it. It does tend to hold on to moisture, and it does compact very easily. And then in the middle of that triangle, you can see where it actually has it mentions loam, and that tends to be a mix of one or two of the main principal ones there, which is the clay, the sand, and the silt. It tends to avoid the extremes of those characteristics of those three, and it tends to be a bit of a mix of the both. If you fall into that category, then you've kind of, it's a little bit easier to manage in the sense of being able to get it to drain, being able to work out how it holds onto nutrients. If you have got loam, you probably see yourself as reasonably fortunate. And again, just a bit of an understanding really of that the particle sizes that you're probably going to see there. So again, this is just to give you a bit of a graphic and a bit of an understanding of how you see it there. So it gives you a really good idea that obviously sand being quite porous, those particles can't really piece together very well. So moisture can move quite freely through it. Silt, obviously you can see there, practically not quite microscopic, but clay next to it. Obviously that makes sense. You can't see it. It tends to find that it's lots of particles pushed together, making up that soil. So yeah, that just gives you a bit of an indicator really of how that all works. I'm going to move on to sort of some more characteristics that you'll get in terms of the soil types and what they can do, and what they're capable of on their own naturally. So again, I mentioned previously about pH. And this is actually, realistically, is a very, very important thing to just take into account. So it'll give you an indicator of how your soil can actually be effective with regards to nutrients. So pH has the ability to actually stop some nutrients working. And again, it doesn't stop, but it just changes the availability of it as you move through the pH spectrum. So again, this is another reason why you should really have a good understanding of your soil, because as much as you think, yeah, okay, I'm going to get some fertilizer and put that on, you don't know how your pitch and your soil is going to react to that and how well it's going to be able to use that. So you need to first and foremost, have a really good understanding of what that is actually going to look like. pH, just to give you an idea of what some of these that can actually affect pH. Decomposition of organic matter. So obviously a lot of you guys are letting your clippings fly. So that decomposition of organic matter on the top there, that will change the pH, certainly in and around that area. The indigenous material. So obviously if it's clay, like I mentioned, that's more likely to be alkaline. If it's more sandy loam, then it's more likely to be a bit more acidic. Precipitation, again, has an impact on pH. Normally rain tends to be on the acidic side. If we have a lot of rain, that likelihood is will affect the pH of the soil over a period of time. Nitrogen fertilization, same principle. You do that input there, that is going to have an impact on your pH. So again, something to take into account. And like I just mentioned, with the precipitation and prolonged amounts of precipitation, flooding as well, that's going to have make a big shift on your pH. So probably be recommended that if you have had flooding, then it's certainly going to be worth checking your pH afterwards just to see how much that has actually changed. So again, this is just a little bit of a graphic here. I'm sure a lot of you have possibly seen this. Anybody who's had any formal training will obviously see this, but if you researched pH of soil, this is going to give you an idea of what those key nutrients, how effective they are in and around the pH range. So obviously you can see there it goes from 4, which is obviously very acidic, up to 10, which is very alkaline. Generally, the magic number, everybody seems to say it's like 6.5. That normally means that nutrients are going to be at their most effective. So neither one nor the other, it's not going to really be locked up. Also, just to take into account that ryegrass actually prefers that kind of range of acidity. So it tends to establish itself a little bit better, grows quicker. It tends to be very happy at that sort of range of pH as well. Also, just to take into account, once you start slipping below and start moving into the acidity, and I've had issues with pitches that I've worked on where I've been trying to work with a pitch that was so acidic it was sitting around 4.8, and that was primarily what I had to try and change first before I even considered what types of fertilizer I was going to use, because essentially whatever I was putting on was going to have minimal effect. So we tended to find, again, I was bypassing essentially the soil, and I was just using foliar feeds. It was just going straight into the plant and try and skip all that out until I could get that pH buffered and up to an acceptable target level. Again, if it starts dropping below that 4.5, whatever fertilizer you put on, only 10% of it is actually going to be available to the plant. So again, I'm just trying to reiterate here how important it is to kind of really get a good idea of what your soil is doing before you even get to the stage of purchasing any kind of fertilizer. Again, just going back to it there with the pH dropping below 4.5. So there it says with a polymer coated, we are going to go on to that. So essentially that's a controlled release fertilizer. With that analysis of 25.8, actually when it drops below 4.5, it's more like a 201. So it goes to show you how ineffective fertilizer is if the pH is very acidic. So that's just, again, I'm trying to just show you guys that you really do need to have a good look at your soil, the characteristics, and what it is actually, what it can actually achieve. This is quite simple. It's worthwhile just doing the testing, which is what we're going to come on to. Now, for those of you that have got clay-based pitches, you need to understand that the likelihood is that it's actually retaining a lot of nutrient already. So naturally, it's able to bind and hold on to positive chemical ions very easily. So cation exchange capacity. So this is basically the ability for soil particles to hold on to nutrients. So sand or sandy loam, for instance, that's not as capable of holding on to nutrients as well as a clay particle. And it's purely just down to the surface area. So in terms of volume, so if you had a handful of sand and a handful of clay, that handful of clay will be able to hold on to far more nutrient than the handful of sand. By nature, sand is, again, it normally gives you an indicator, really. So if clay feels sticky, nutrients stick. Sand, not so sticky, it doesn't seem to hold on to the nutrients as well. And again, that's just part of this piece here, where if you're able to work with the basics of your clay pitches, the likelihood is that in terms of having to input nutrition, it'll be absolutely minimal. You're going to be able to have a really good understanding of what your pitch is capable of in that first few times. Once you get the basics and you can aerate it and you can work through that process, you'll find it'll be able to just hold on to that nutrient and it'll be staying greener for much, much longer. So it's definitely worth looking at. Again, this is just a bit of a close-up, just to give you a bit of an idea of what you're looking at there. As you can see, the molecules there, all holding onto the clay. It's a negative charge. It's opposites attract, basically. So soil and anything within that holds a negative charge. Chemicals are positively charged, so they're actually attracted to the soil particles. Let's move on to the next slide. And again, because sand basically can't hold on to that many nutrient ions, it tends to lose that nutrient. It tends to leach away. So it tends to, just because it physically can't hold on to it, it moves further away. So essentially the plant actually can't access it. So you will have to put on more fertiliser to compensate for that loss of nutrient. And again, that's so important as to why the CEC value is worth looking at and have a good understanding of what that is. And there's the best way to make sure you can see all these characteristics and what your pitch has actually got is to actually have your soil analysed. And this might be seen as a bit of a luxury, really, but to be honest, you can do this once a year and it can potentially actually save you money in the long run, because you're going to be able to essentially going to be able to hold on to and have a good idea of, number one, what's already in there, so you don't have to go and purchase fertiliser so prior to this, because you want to know what you have to put on. So look, at the end of the day, you can have guys come in there and they can have a look at your pitch for you, and again, they'll recommend something to you, but really you need to have an idea of what your pitch already has in it. So get some soil samples, get it sent away for analysis, and then get that to come back. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something you need to look to be doing. And if you do it before each fertilizer purchase and before you apply, actually that'll determine what fertilizer you actually put onto your pitch and get the most out of it as well. It just takes out all that guesswork. Don't just assume that if you buy a fertilizer, put it down, it's going to be effective. Yes, it might be to a degree, but it might not be giving you what you actually need. So the next slide, like I mentioned earlier, this is actually June's test results from here at Twickenham. This is what you can expect to get back from a analysis report. So this is what you're going to be looking at. It will give you your pH. It will give you all the key nutrients. It will give you the actual value that you've got in that pitch. As you can see at Twickenham, we're pretty green, apart from manganese, which according to my deputy Ian, has always been like that. Again, it has to be seen that if that's deficient, then we need to try and look at trying to do an input in that, which is discussions that I'm going to be having tomorrow. And also molybdenum, which is again another one that we have issues with just holding on to there. Also, you can just see down there, same portion with the triangle there. You can see where Twickenham sits, which is down at the bottom left-hand corner of that triangle. We sit comfortably in the sand bracket. It's 93% sand. So again, that is purely making sure that that 1 in 1,000 Armageddon style rain, we're going to have no issues with the pitch. So currently its infiltration rate is 750 millimeters an hour. So again, it has the capabilities of draining very, very quickly. And then obviously to add into that, it also hasn't got the ability to hold on to nutrient very well. So we do tend to rely on foliar applications. So we almost tend to bypass to a degree the actual root zone because it's just hasn't got the ability to hold on to the nutrient long enough. And that's purely because of the other cultural practices we're implementing at the time. And again, they tend to be significant inputs, and it happens to be very, very frequent. So on average, over a course of a year, for us, we'll be putting anywhere between maybe 600 to 800 kilograms of nitrogen, which is an extremely high amount. I mean, it is to a degree quite excessive, but that's what we need to get to achieve that turf health and have it growing well through that process. And again, the pitch construction, it dictates the nutrient inputs requirements. So again, like I say, if it's sandy, the likelihood is your nutrient input's going to have to be higher. If it's more clay-based, the likelihood is you won't need to feed anywhere near as much as the guys that have got sandy loams. And again, usage also has a factor. We need to keep that in mind, that you need the pitch to recover after usage as well. So next, nutrients and their roles in turf. Ted, do you want to take back over?
Yes, I just want to take the opportunity to give you a little rest.
Thank you.
And grab a little water or alternative drink of your choice. So one of the best things about the webinars we found were the polls and the questions in terms of gathering that intel, if you like, from everyone out there of their views and what they're doing and the challenges they face. And that is crucial information when we're trying to mold programs, we're trying to make the case for funding, so I really get that insight into what the true issues are. So the first question for tonight, and don't forget, if you answer the questions within the chat, take your time and let us know what you think, and we will be picking all that information up. It's a really simple question. It's, why do you apply fertiliser? What is the main reason? What are the main reasons that you, at your club, would apply fertiliser to your pitch? It doesn't need to be a scientific reason or a molecular reason. It could just be a very, very simple language. Tell us a little bit about why you apply fertiliser. We'll pick that up. We'll take it away. We'll discuss it. And Jim can obviously use that in terms of the next few slides. So we'll leave that question open. Please use the chat. I think there's a couple of people, I think generally speaking, 99% of people, the connection is good. A couple of people having a few challenges, and hopefully you're sorting that out, and we're trying to help you. Some great questions. The VPAs are in the chat responding to some of the stuff, and we seem to be ticking along nicely. So I'll hand back over to Jim.
Thanks, Ted. I'll just move across now. So, some of the main reasons for applying fertiliser. Obviously now we've got a bit of an idea of soil capabilities and what we can do. Just to touch on it really with regards to like your clay-based pitches, doing some of the basics just with the aeration and just maintaining that turf to a slightly higher standard. Like it is with that aeration, as long as it's warm enough, it's going to release nutrient and the grass is going to be able to take it up. So it's going to have some natural capabilities to be able to take nutrient up. So that's a bonus with clay. Unfortunately, on the flip side, from a playability perspective and usage, it starts to roll the other way. So yeah, it's about getting that balance right. So many of the reasons for applying fertiliser. Replacing nutrients lost if you're boxing off clippings. I'm sure a lot of you guys are not. You're letting your clippings fly, which is perfect. That is a natural fertiliser. Essentially, that will just become part of the nitrogen cycle, will be broken down. That'll all form and actually move back through into the profile, slowly degrading, and then again it'll just be releasing back into that profile, and the grass will just recycle it and it'll take it back up. Again, requirements, more growth to just repair wear and tear, so you need to be able to get that balance right, but be able to feed in it enough that it can recover from having usage on it. That's quite important, especially when you're discussing with guys that are coming into and you're looking to purchase fertiliser, is actually just having a good look there of what you're actually trying to achieve. Again, you might not your health of the turf might not be quite as where you want it to be. So again, this helps optimize that. Your inputs will help to make the turf more healthy. It can help correct deficiencies. Again, if you have your soil analysis done and it comes back and it shows where your deficiencies are, you can begin to start to input those. Turf appearance. Obviously, all of us will love to have nice green striped up rugby pitches. Again, that's going to help. And again, when you're doing your renovations, or if you're going to do any overseed or anything like that, again, this will help encourage that establishment of any new seeds when you're putting that type of fertilizer down. So grasses require 16 nutrients for normal healthy growth. So it's a little bit more outside your NPK. But again, all of it is comparable, so it's all about balance. So again, some nutrients are needed in larger amounts. So for instance, it will be your nitrogen will obviously be at the high end, but then there'll be some others that necessarily might not need anywhere near that amount, like your molybdenums, your irons, your magnesiums. They only need small amounts just to kind of keeping the turf healthy. A deficiency is basically that can happen to any. If you're deficient in any nutrients, it will have an impact on how that turf grows. So we just need to be very aware that it doesn't matter that if you think you haven't put enough nitrogen on, that it's just as much as you're going to have a detrimental effect if you don't have enough. For instance, as it says here, calcium in there. It doesn't matter. The likelihood is if you have a deficiency in calcium, it's going to have as much of an impact on you as it is if you have a deficiency in nitrogen. So it's things that you certainly need to consider. I'll just click across because Ted, over to you for another one.
Yeah, quick fire, another question. Some great response there to the previous question. Some great answers. Growing the grass seems to be the most popular one, but there's some brilliant stuff in there as well as that. So thank you for your contribution. Next question, again, it's another simple question. It's all about building the picture, hearing from you guys. What would be interested to know is what fertiliser did you last apply to your own pitches, and when did you do it? And that can be a scientific answer about the type of fertilizer. It can be a product name if you want to share that. We're just really interested to see what's happening out there, what you're doing, when you're doing it. So please share your thoughts in the chat. I think Alex will probably pop the question into the chat as well to remind you, and we'll leave that open for a little while and collate all that information and feedback. Jim, hopefully you've had another short breather. And I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Ted. Right, we'll roll on. So macronutrients and their roles. So 9 of the 16 nutrients that are required for turf are needed in larger quantities than the other 7. So there is a kind of a split, as it were. So it gives you a bit of an indicator as to you need to make sure that we're looking at all of these nutrients as a whole, but there are going to be some that are going to be required more than others, and the amounts are also going to be changing. So primary nutrients there, that is our NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and that will always tend to be the biggest bulk of makeup in terms of the bag, what's in the bag. I'm going to just move through some of these just so, again, we get a bit of an idea of obviously what each one of these nutrients do. I won't dwell on it too much, but just gives you a bit of an idea of what we're looking at. So nitrogen is a growth nutrient. So it's a mineral that's used in the biggest or largest amount of quantities by the grass. And that nitrogen is one that's going to cause physically what happens to the plant is going to make it grow. So the leaf, it does help the root to grow as well. But yeah, primarily it's going to be the leaf. Phosphorus. This is a very important element when it comes to seed development and root development. So you're going to have some form of phosphorus in that. And it's normally when you guys are going to be looking to apply this will most likely be at renovation times. So when you have overseeded, it's important that when you do apply fertilizer, that it does have some phosphorus in it. And it's also quite an important element for photosynthesis, which is obviously very important. That's what the grass is doing pretty much all the time. Potassium. This is helping sort of the metabolism of the plant and its system. So it's helping converting the sugars and starches and proteins. So it's all part of that process of creating the energy for the plant. So also with potassium, it's quite a useful nutrient to apply for the winter as well, because it's got that ability to just help harden the plant. So it makes it a little bit more tolerant to having sort of like in the cold, and obviously the likelihood of having disease. That's going to help prepare the plant. It's going to be stronger for it. And we've got some of the other ones here, which is also, again, quite crucial. So we've got the calcium and magnesium. They tend to go hand in hand. So you're going to see a lot of fertilizer products, and a lot of them will tend to have calcium and magnesium together. So calcium and magnesium in themselves. Magnesium is crucial because that's actually part of the chlorophyll cell. So again, that's actually going to help create that green. Very similar to iron. It just does it obviously because iron's changing the actual characteristics of the plant. The magnesium is actually part of the plant. It's part of the process. Calcium, that will help harden off the leaf and actually give you a bit of tensile strength as well, which is quite crucial. Sulfur, again, that's going to be part of that process where you're going to need. It tends to be a part of the makeup of most fertilizers, so you'll tend to find it's going to be part of it. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. I mean, obviously these are quite large ones, but this is all actually part of the plant can naturally just get access to these in the form of obviously water and CO2 for those three elements there. So it's quite a good one to have there. And again, here's a few of the other ones as well. So iron, again, that's a requirement for the chlorophyll. So again, that creating that green in the plant. Manganese, that's actually, again, part of that process, and it helps the iron to a certain degree as well. We've got zinc, so it's a plant regulator, so that's actually just helping that root development for the plant growth. We've got boron, so that's actually regulating the metabolism and the processing of carbohydrates in the plant. Copper and chlorine, so it's activating enzymes in terms of the copper. So actually that's now being looked at as being part of that disease suppression. So you can actually, in stadiums, we actually try to apply some of that in a foliar feed. So it's actually trying to create the ability for the plant to protect itself. Chlorine, which sounds a bit strange that you don't think you're normally going to see things like that in terms of a nutrient, but that's quite important for the photosynthesis process as well, and root development. Molybdenum is a kind of strange one, really. I mean, again, it's not really one that's very well thought of, to be honest, but it assists that whole nitrogen uptake. So it does have a role to play in regards to turf development, but it's a strange one because, again, we have for here, for instance, we've got a molybdenum deficiency. You wouldn't know it. Obviously, everything else is in a very good position. You tend to find the more deficiencies you have visually, the more likely you're going to start seeing issues. And then with the nickel, again, that's just part of the helps with part of the life cycle of the plant. So again, there's a lot of things here that just I don't want to try and blow you away really with regards to what all of these functions and roles have, and there is plenty of resources out there where you can actually get hold of all of this and start to digest it at your own pace, really. So we won't, like I say, we won't kind of hang about really on this one. So we'll move on to the next one. So again, this is a kind of thing I'm quite keen on kind of sharing with you guys, and it's actually sort of the available fertilizers on the market and what's out there. And again, the mineral and conventional fertilizers, this is most likely what you guys have been purchasing. So it tends to be reasonably cheap to buy. The granular fertilizers, they can tend to come in different sizes. There's certain standards that they have to hit with regards to being able to be used over here. And you tend to get varying analysis of NPK. So it's the idea is that it's aimed at certain times of the year that you use certain types of fertilizer. So you do to get your spring summer, you tend to find the analysis of that the nitrogen starts to pick up slowly, the phosphorus tends to stay quite stable, and you have a little bit of potassium. And then as you start moving into the autumn winter, they do tend to start to level out a little bit. The nitrogen starts to drop off because it's not such a major requirement in autumn winter. The phosphorus tends to sit level, and the potassium tends to just nudge a little bit higher than you'd normally expect. In terms of time and how long you're expecting this to be effective for, so using this type of fertilizer, you're looking at around a month. So you're going to get 30 days, possibly 35 days effectiveness out of this. Maybe on clay surfaces, again, this is just very much a general time. You're not going to know because each pitch is going to be slightly different. It might drain differently. It might be very heavy in clay, in which case you might feed it once and you might not need to worry about it for 12 months. I mean, you're not going to find out until you really get a good understanding of your pitch characteristics and how that works. And again, you've got lots of factors to take into account: the temperature. If you've had lots of rain, that's going to have an impact on that fertiliser input you've had. If it's been plenty of rain, the likelihood some of it's leached. So all these things just need to be taken into account. So we're going to get into more of the complex ones. So sulfur-coated urea. So this is basically the nitrogen form. Urea is the most common one. It's normally the cheapest to get hold of and use. So what we've got here is essentially what's going to be coated. And it can only be broken down by moisture. So it's normally going to be effective. There's no point putting it down in soil at the end of spring, for instance, when it's all going to start to become a little bit drier. You're not going to have as much moisture in the ground, so therefore it's not going to be as effective. If you put it down in autumn, winter, so September time, October time, the likelihood is that's going to just slowly start breaking down over that whole period there. If you use it a lot, it could potentially affect the pH. So again, you need to be able to just take that in and just understand that you need to check that pH over a period of time. I don't think you guys are going to be applying enough of it to have such a big impact, but again, it's something you need to be aware of. And in terms of cost effectiveness, it's actually quite good. So as it says up there, it's got a 2 to 3 month. You're not going to get this huge spurt of growth. It's going to be nice and steady. And like I say, as long as you've not had huge downpours, the likelihood is that this is going to be sat there for quite some time, slowly releasing the nutrients as and when the plant needs it. And this is another version. So this is slightly more, slightly different technology. So this is polymer coated. You can see on the graphics there how that works. So essentially the urea, again, is just actually encapsulated in a polymer coating. And then what happens is the water actually can move through that coating, starts to dissolve the nitrogen, and that solution then can actually just move out into the soil. This needs, again, this is a requirement of temperature and moisture. So it's going to need a bit of both of those to be able to work properly. But again, because it's got a variable release, so it's not kind of happening all at once, but then it's not kind of putting out peaking and troughing. It's literally working with the weather and releasing that nitrogen at the time when the grass is most likely to grow. So it's actually one to seriously consider if, in terms of a budget, this is something you need to look at. So it's certainly worth a look. I think the best process to kind of look through this is the same as just kind of envisage it as making a cup of tea, basically. So if you use warm water, that tea's released a lot quicker. And if you use cold water, then obviously that's going to trickle out a lot slower. So it's essentially the same process. And we have liquid fertilizers. So liquid fertilizers on this one. So this is one of those where it's used a lot in terms of elite sport and pitches that are sand based, purely because, again, we're bypassing that root zone. That's normally the primary reason we're going to be using these nutrients in liquid form. It can improve colour really quickly, so you tend to find if you've had any issues or your granular fertiliser hasn't really done what it needs to do, you can actually put this down, and normally within 24 hours you're going to see an improvement in colour. It's very, very quick because, again, like I say, it's already solubilized. The plant can take it up immediately. It's good to go. You can actually tank mix it with other products, so you don't just take a liquid fertilizer and just pour that in the tank. You have actually the ability to put a fungicide in if you've got disease. You can put other products in there. It all tends to be quite good, so it's actually quite efficient to use in that sense. You actually be able to put more in the tank, so you put more products down or different types of product down. In terms of effectiveness, again, this is going to have a little bit of variables in terms of the weather conditions, but normally you're looking at around 7 to 14 days. I think 14 days will probably be a stretch, and you're probably looking more again for the guys that got clay-based pitches. I mean, for us, for instance, here at Twickenham, we could spray that on, and we'll probably look at more likely 7 to 10 days. So it's we tend to spray every 7 to 10 days to obviously keep up with that. So it's quite interesting Like I say, what kind of options you've got there, but it's certainly something to look at. And we have another poll. Alex Bowden, over to you.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks everyone for the input in the chat. There's some really good sort of detail of what people are using out there and what they're doing on their pitches. So we want to try and get a bit more feel for how often now people are doing that. So I'm going to launch another poll, which will appear on your screen now. Just a reminder that if you're on full screen, just need to reduce your screen back to the small size to be able to take part in the poll. So that will be up now. And the poll is, how often are your pitches fertilised per year? Never, once, twice, 3 or more times. Just in a couple of seconds to get your input into that. As Lawrence, one of the VPAs, said in the chat, there's a real wide range of what people are using out there, which is great to see. So hopefully this allows us to get a bit more information. So I'm going to close the poll in a couple of seconds. I'm actually closing your screen. I'm going to publish those results, but there's some really good stuff there. There's only a very small percentage that are never doing it. 37% once a year, 37% twice a year, and 23% 3 or more times. So really good split there, and that'll hopefully lead in really nicely to what Tim's going to go on to next. So thanks, Jim. I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Alex. Okay. Like I say, guys, I mean, I try not to get too sciencey, but I think it was quite crucial that you guys can just get a bit of a vibe and get a bit of a better understanding of what, like I say, what your pitch is capable of on its own, just naturally, and then what additional inputs you need to do to help the effectiveness and the efficiency of your pitches. Right, so this will just give you a bit of an indicator here of how that prolonged kind of work with putting the fertilizer down and how effective it is, and for the longevity. So as you can see here, so we've got the blue bar. That's essentially just what we'll go back to the beginning of this set of slides. That's conventional mineral fertilizer. This is just an example, but essentially that's 1 month. That's your September gone. All 15 analysis of nitrogen, that's gone, finished. 30 to 35 days. So the sulfur coated, that tends to obviously break down over the period. That's the one that's just based on moisture to release. That's more likely to start to extend out. So you're going to be able to get a bit more longevity from that sulfur coated. And then you've got your polymer coated there. So again, it's not that big bam of nitrogen. You're not going to get that huge flush of growth. It's going to be just very nice and steady, that release. And this is the one that requires that temperature and that nitrogen there. It's going to obviously start to tail off, but it's only going to be effective when the grass is most likely to grow. So the grass will only grow when it's warm and it's got the conditions to do so, and the nitrogen will release at the same sort of time in that polymer coated fertilizer. So again, it's very dependent on conditions, but again, it's just to give you a bit of a generalized graphic there, just to show you how that nitrogen is released out of those different types of products. So as much as it's nice to go and say, right, okay, we'll just get conventional fertilizer, you just need to understand how long that's going to last through that period there. And again, this is just an example. I've just plucked prices out of the air, but again, it's just to give you that idea of that cost per day in terms of to feed that pitch per day based on those 3 different ones. So your conventional fertilizer, again, with the likelihood is you're looking to 30 to 35 days, dependent on conditions. And there it just gives you a bit of an indicator on that cost price per day to feed the pitch with that conventional fertilizer. The sulfur coated one, again, it's going to be slightly more expensive, but again, that longevity is going to start to stretch out a little bit now. So we're looking at probably almost double the longevity over a conventional fertilizer. So you're going to be looking that, again, that price starts to come down then with regards to that, feeding it per day. Again, it's trying to give you guys an idea of how that all works. And again, there on the bottom one there, again, the polymer coated, yes, it's very advanced technology, and yes, it costs a little bit more than it would do over the other two, but again, you pay what you get for what you pay for is what you get, basically. So again, that longevity, it starts to stretch out again. Again, that gives you that indicator on that price per day. It starts to drop down a little bit more. So it just gives you an indicator of bang for your buck. So basically, if you were looking to just say, right, I can only afford to do one feed per year, this is how much I've got in my budget. How best should I use it? What's the most effective and efficient way of spending that money, and give the pitch what it needs? So yeah, it's just a bit of an indicator there, just to kind of give you an idea that there's more options out there than you think there might be, and it's just not always best to go for the cheapest version, because, like I say, it's all over in a month. So and essentially you'll be going back to square one. We're moving on here to just some fertilizer applications. So we're going to move on to another poll. So back over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Jim. So a final poll of the evening, everyone. Just want to get a bit of a feel for actually who's doing some of the work for you in terms of the fertiliser. So I'm going to launch the poll now. And the poll is just to give us a view on who spreads your fertiliser. So do you do it yourself? Have someone who does it for free? Do you pay a contractor? So the poll will stay up for a few more seconds. Again, if you're on the full screen, you just need to reduce the view so you can see the poll. Just give it a couple more seconds. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to put their answers in now, and we'll close the poll. Brilliant. So in terms of the results, I'll put those up on your screen again now. But a large number, 57%, do it yourself. Small number, get somebody else to do it for free, and then 40% are using a contractor. So some great different uses out there. I'll hand back to Jim, who will follow on into some of the thoughts on that. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Alex. Right, it's good that you guys are all getting engaged with this. It's brilliant. I'm happy we've got some things coming through there, so that's good. So again, this is I had this graphic up on the webinar last month as part of that planning piece, and again, I thought it was quite appropriate to bring something back in for that. So again, this is that whole conventional fertilizer. So this is probably a little bit more of a personal opinion, but this is probably what I would be looking to try and do in terms of fertilizer applications if I'm just using that conventional / mineral fertilizer. So the slightly cheaper fertilizer, it'll give you a bit of an indicator of the fact that you're actually looking at realistically probably 5 feeds a year to be able to get the most out of it. So essentially you're going to be getting those 5 feeds are essentially going to be giving you sort of 5 to 6 months of actual nutrient in the ground. So it's half the year basically. So it's just giving you that bit of an indicator of where and when you should be feeding it. That again, the magnesium, that if you have a fertilizer with that magnesium in there, like I mentioned earlier, that's all part of the chlorophyll cell. So with that magnesium in there, that will give you that green, a very nice natural green. So that's predominantly what I use here at Twickenham, that magnesium element there. So it kind of gives you that nice colour. And then when again you're moving into that autumn winter, that fertiliser adjustment, you're going to probably looking to have that bit of calcium in there that'll help that nitrogen uptake, and it will harden the plant off and have it prepared for that autumn winter usage. And again, you're looking at potentially a couple of feeds there as well to really kind of get you through that period of growth there. So you're optimising those application inputs when the grass is actually going to need it. There's no use putting a fertiliser on in January, February. The grass is not doing anything; it's completely dormant. The weather's not right for it to start growing, so there's no need for you to apply any fertiliser. But you need to respond in kind for when it does start to grow. You're going to start putting that input in there to start encouraging that growth. And again, same period again in that autumn period where you're going to get that natural recovery from summer decline. And again, you're going to get that root development. So that's all got to be part of that thought process for you guys when you're applying your fertilizers. Now, if I move on to the next one, I can't actually see it on my screen, so I'll just kind of go through with it. So this again is going to be based on fertilizing timings. It's just going to be more that control release, that slow release element. The actual likelihood is you're going to get away with possibly doing 2 applications, and that's more or less going to cover your entire growing period through that time. So it's going to give you that process of just what we're looking to do in terms of that fertilizer input. You're going to be able to apply that. You're going to get that winter period there that you're going to be able to put an application on in September. The likelihood is that's that sulfur coated one where it's just reliant on moisture. That's going to go through that entire period for you. And then obviously when you start moving back round to the spring, you can actually start going through some of that period there where the temperatures are going to be there. You're going to be able to take that that period there. You're going to be able to put it on, and the temperature is going to be there for that polymer coating to start working. I'm just going to try and work out now whereabouts I am because I actually can't see the slide. I think we're on calculating how much to apply, which was one period there, which again just gives you an idea of what we need to do when you're applying it in terms of that process. Again, I'm just trying to work out what slide we're actually on because I'm not seeing it my end, unfortunately. So yeah, at the moment we've got some top tips there in terms of the fertilizer as well. So just to kind of go through some of this for you. Again, try and measure the area out exactly before you actually apply your fertilizer. If you know what your pitch size is, you should be able to work out your grams per meter squared. And then again, you can just obviously work out how many bags you're going to require for that area. Again, you're going to have to sort of make sure you don't over apply anything. Again, it can cause damage to the turf. You could actually apply so much fertilizer that you're going to get all the types of growth you don't want. So again, you need to apply it in amounts that you can actually deal with. So yeah, it's certainly something that we need to be looking at there. I'm still working through some of the slides. I think we're having some technical issues this side. So I'm not too sure what you guys are able to see. So I'm kind of just going to keep talking through what I'm actually seeing on my screen. So in terms of choosing the right type of fertilizer spreader, I think most of you guys are going to be working with rotary spreaders. Pedestrian ones, they are quick, they are efficient. They're not potentially going to give you what you're actually going to need in that sense. They're accurate enough for what us guys are using. Anybody that's doing bowls, greens, or even cricket squares or anything like that. But yeah, I think it's going to be one of those where we're looking at some of those elements of just trying to work out what we're doing. I'm just going to try and work out if I can come back in. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to work out if I'm getting through on some of this on the technology side.
Yeah, Jim, can you hear me at all?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I can hear you, Ted. Sorry, I'm having a few technical issues on my side.
No. It would seem that we have come up against our first major technical meltdown, which is that the slides, we don't know why, we're trying to fix it in the background, are frozen and we can't see them on the screen as you have suggested. But we are getting very close to 8 o'clock. So what I'm going to suggest, firstly, going to apologise that the technology has let us down. It's taken 1 hour and 59 minutes over 2 webinars for that to happen. What I'm going to suggest is, Jim, you had a couple of slides left. I think if we draw things to a close, I can summarize, and then we can obviously get the information out to everybody, get those last slides, which covered some top tips. And we can then obviously try and use technology to publish, if you like, the recorded version, and we'll find a way to include these last few slides in it. So, Jim, if you have any closing comments before I just fire through the summary.
Yeah, I mean, I know obviously we've got an audience there that's full of turfies and they're keen as mustard to learn, and I'm hoping that we managed to get some of that information across to you guys. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't want it to be too heavy. I wanted it just to kind of give you a bit of enough of an introduction to maybe do some research yourselves, which obviously there's plenty of content out there that we can do, and we've obviously got our own resources which guys can use. So yeah, I mean, again, I'm hoping you guys got enough from it that you needed to, and like I say, just fire up there on the chat. It'd be good to get some feedback. So yeah, no, it's been good. Oh, I think we've lost Ted. Have we lost Ted?
Apologies all, I think we've lost Ted as well there. Thanks for the wrap up there, Jim. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes, I can.
Bit of teamwork just to finish up. So just thank you to everybody. Ted may rejoin us and the wrap up there. As we said, there is a lot of information, but don't forget that the resource library is there, and you can come back and download that at any point. We'll send out links following tonight's session with what's available to download. Just a bit of a plug as well. Rugby Grounds Connected is a network which we want to develop and we want to grow as part of the support for the clubs. So you can still join that. An email to Rugby Grounds Connected at rfu.com, and again we'll send those details out. But please feel free to join. And I think that the most important thing for us is looking at that chat bar. The amount of questions and content that's coming in from you guys is amazing. And we can see the interaction between clubs, which is what we want to try and do to help everybody get the best they can out of their pitches. So please keep feeding those questions in. The email address is there. As you've seen, we're all very active on Twitter as well, so our other forms of social media. We want to try and start to grow this. The VPA virtual visits, as we're in the COVID situation, have been piloted and have gone well. And hopefully we'll be able to get those out for face-to-face visits soon as well. So I'll just see if we've got Ted back. If not, what I'd like to do is just wrap up and thank everybody for their participation tonight. As I said, we will follow up with some more information, and do keep those questions coming in on the chat. We'll hang around for a little bit longer. So if you've got any more you want to ask, please just keep typing them in. And any that we don't get to, we will come back to you over the next week or so with those answers. So thank you very much for joining us tonight, and we look forward to you joining us on our next one, which will be hotly promoted for September. We're going to take the month of August off with so much happening around the return to play. We'll come back to you in September. Thanks everyone. Thanks Jim.
Cheers. Thanks everyone.